Hello, I'm Jonasz Rywnicki and you're watching TVP World Talks, where every word matters. Now, it seems obvious that words alone are not enough to ensure credible deterrence. This actually requires action. And for that reason, the Polish government has begun an initiative known as the East Shield, essentially a system of fortifications designed to keep enemy forces out at the eastern border. But will it be successful? What does it entail? What else needs to be done in order to make sure that Russia never actually tries to challenge NATO on the eastern flank? We're going to talk about this with our guest today, Dr. Jacek Raubo, Director at Defense 24. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Hello, sir, and thank you for the invitation.
I'm glad that you could join us here today, and this is a developing story. We know that the East Shield project has been announced quite a while ago. Now it is being accelerated. Do you think that 4 years will be enough to ensure credible deterrence on NATO's eastern flank?
When we are thinking about the deterrence and defense mission of Poland on the eastern flank, and also in the context of NATO, we are always dealing with the long-term actions. It is not only based on the Eastern Shield initiative, but also with other aspects like a modernization of armed forces, building effective host nation mission from all the NATO member states. So I think this is only the part of the system of the systems. Because, of course, right now we are mostly focusing on the Polish border with Belarus, with Russia. But on the other hand, we need to put this in more holistic picture of the whole eastern flank actions. Look on the situation with our Baltic neighbors and Baltic allies. They are doing the same thing because armed forces need to have mostly, of course, people and equipment, but on the other hand, they need to have some background for the actions, for both actions. As you mentioned before, deterrence is also put in the context of the Eastern Shield initiative.
So you've mentioned systems, and I'm actually glad that you do, because some people who are really not into defense issues and security issues might think, oh, is this like the Maginot Line, something that is just about bunkers? But it really is not. It is actually, as you said, a holistic approach. There is going to be lots of electronic surveillance, protection against drone attacks, for example. Can you give us more details on how is it going to work, of course, within the scope of what we know and what can be revealed without jeopardizing the confidential nature of parts of this project?
Therefore, we are dealing with the various threats. We need to build a more comprehensive approach to this group of threats. That's why I see, first of all, some fortifications, because on the other hand, we need to think more about the conventional forms of pressure against our territory, like Russia did in 2022 against Ukraine. But on the other hand, as you mentioned, we are dealing with more sophisticated and more newest threats coming from the technology. That's why there is such an emphasis of this unmanned and counter-unmanned systems in the direction of this Eastern Shield. So I think it is a very difficult right now to see all of the aspects because there is many variances, there is many scenarios dedicated to this. But as you see and as we see, first of all on the plans, but secondary on the training ground, this is a very comprehensive approach coming from the Polish armed forces and government. So it will be a very delicate story with Eastern Shield, because I think we need to be much more pragmatic in building this, because today, of course, we are having plans for the next year, for next years, but on the the other hand, we need to be on touch with, for instance, some new threats, which might happen soon, because we are observing Ukrainian conflict and we see how fast there is, how rapid changes are there with, for instance, this mentioned unmanned platform. So first of all, ISR capabilities, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. We need to put this on our borderline with Belarus and Russia to give us more opportunities to watch directly how Russia and how Belarus is doing with the armed forces, but also with other forms of pressure, like with mercenaries, PMCs, and, for instance, some intelligence activities close to our border. Second thing, we need to have a lot of logistic support to our armed forces which are operating close to border. And the third thing, we need to signalize to Russia and to Belarus that crossing our border is not effective. It's not effective from the military side and also from the political side. And that's why this initiative coming from Poland, coming from the Baltic states, and also from other eastern flank neighbors and northern flank neighbors and our partners in NATO, is a vital sign that we are prepared and we would like to save our deterrence capabilities, because every action which can stop, for instance, aggression, is giving us time to mobilize forces, to provide more reinforcements on the eastern flank. So this is not only a Polish idea. This is something which is clearly focusing on strengthening NATO capabilities on the eastern flank. And we need to think more about these different layers, not only a country issue and dilemmas. This is also this more larger layer directly connected with NATO actions.
Speaking of NATO, I think this also is worth emphasizing that this initiative reflects a change in the global thinking about how war on the eastern flank could be waged. NATO's former strategy was all about essentially allowing the country that is being invaded to mount its defenses and to take back annexed territories, right? But now we're actually emphasizing the fact that we have to focus on area denial from day one so that the enemy does not penetrate into our territory. And this is because of the war crimes committed by Russia. The NATO saw it cannot allow any territories to be taken because of what could take place there, right?
I have a very clear answer. 2 words: lessons learned. We are getting this directly from the various Russian actions against different nations. Of course, mostly we are focusing on the Ukrainian issue with Russian two aggressions in row, 2014, 2015, and also this large-scale aggression from 2022 till now. But on the other hand, we need to think more about the Georgian story, and also other aspects of Russian pressure, sometimes below the threshold of war. So I think we are getting these lessons learned from the NATO perspective. We are building more capabilities and capacities to stop any forms of aggression, because we need to strengthen 2 pillars of NATO. First is, as we mentioned before, deterrence, that the cost of attack against the sovereignty of every nation member is high, that we would like to avoid this full-scale conflict. But on the other hand, we are living in times when we need to think about the second pillar, defense, and we need to provide to our troops, to our people, to government, more tools, more conventional and more unconventional tools, to have this effective power to stop aggression, to postpone any moves of enemy, and also to have these capabilities to use, for instance, fortification lines to provide counterattacks. And I think this is a very ideal sign that we are providing this security to not only for Polish soil perspective, to other members, because we need to remember Suwałki Gap. We need to remember that this part is a vital path, vital road to our Baltic state partners inside NATO. That's why this is a very important action we need to do in long term. As I mentioned before, it will be the process. It is not a short-time action to build one fortification line or to put for instance, equipment on the border. This is a strong, we need to strongly emphasize that this is a strong action against the long-term threat coming from Russia and, unfortunately, from the Belarusian regime.
So what would you say should be our next priority? Poland is actually doing a lot in terms of modernizing its military, buying literally hundreds of multiple launch rocket systems of the same kind that has caused quite a bit of a headache for the Russian logistics in Ukraine. Also, Apache helicopters, F-35 stealth fighters. Is there anything else that Poland should actually have on its list of future purchases that could serve as this sort of powerful deterrence that the Russians might actually look at this and say, no, actually, this doesn't make sense for us because our losses would be simply too great and our effectiveness would be minimized by these weapons? What weapons should those be?
I suppose we are mostly discussing about the weapon story, about building some capabilities toward our military forces. On the other hand, we need to remember that the effective defensive posture is always based on the 2 or even 3 different fields. First is, as you mentioned, a strong army, mostly with armed forces on the land and in the air and also on the sea. On the other hand, there is an intelligence part of that. That's why I think the core of our future tasks are mostly dedicated to strengthening ISR capabilities. I mentioned this abbreviation before, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. And the third thing, connected highly with our position on the eastern flank, this is the host nation capabilities. Why host nation capabilities? Because we need to be able to get reinforcements, not only to provide the effective defense on our soil, but also to have these capabilities to strengthen our partners, like I mentioned before, with Baltic states as a main focus of our position, but on the other hand, with other partners located more on the south of our territory. So host nation is much more even comprehensive. We need to build more roads, paths. We need to strengthen our capabilities to use our ports, seaports, and also airports, and all the things dedicated to logistics. So I think we
a comprehensive approach
right now.
In a word. Unfortunately, we have now run out of time, but this is a very important debate that will no doubt be returning to during the next few weeks and months. As you said, this is an ongoing process. Jacek Raubo, director at Defense 24, was our guest today on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm Orzysz. You're watching TVP World. Please do stay with us.